What happens when a galaxy's most advanced civilizations discover that their greatest warrior isn't some hulking alien berserker or cybernetic killing machine, but a quiet human girl who barely speaks above a whisper in her university classes? They called her Ghost because she moved through enemy lines like smoke through air. They called her Whisper because her voice could barely be heard even in silent rooms. But when the greatest military crisis in galactic history erupted, her battle name became the most feared sound in the universe. This is the story of how a shy human student became the terror of 1,000 worlds, and why every alien species now knows that sometimes the deadliest predators are the ones who never make a sound until it's too late. Prepare yourself for a tale that will redefine everything you thought you knew about human warfare, determination, and the price of underestimating Earth's children. Because when humanity fights, we don't just win battles. We change the very nature of war itself. The lecture hall buzzed with the typical mix of languages that had become commonplace since the Galactic Educational Exchange Program began 3 years ago. Tall, blue-skinned Zalari students clicked their mandibles in quiet conversation, while the crystalline Vaxen beings chimed softly among themselves. Near the back, a group of furry Karath exchanged rapid barks in their native tongue. But in the third row, seat 14, Maya Chun sat in complete silence. Her human appearance drew little attention anymore. After the initial curiosity when Earth joined the Galactic Council, most alien species had grown accustomed to seeing the small, pink-skinned beings scattered throughout their institutions. What did draw attention was Maya's absolute stillness during discussions, her complete lack of participation, and the way she seemed to shrink in her chair whenever Professor Thexani called for questions. The quantum warfare theory suggests that modern conflicts require adaptive thinking, Professor Thexani announced, his 4 eyes scanning the diverse classroom. The reptilian instructor had served as a military strategist for the Draxan Empire before retiring to academia. Can anyone provide an example of unconventional tactics that might surprise a traditional military force? Immediately, several clawed and tentacled appendages shot into the air. The Zalari student in the front row began speaking before being acknowledged, describing complex orbital bombardment patterns. A Karath suggested pack-hunting techniques adapted for urban warfare. The Vaxen representative chimed about frequency-based disruption methods. Maya remained motionless, her dark eyes fixed on her tablet screen, where she took notes in rapid, precise movements. She never raised her hand. She never volunteered information. In 3 years of attendance at the prestigious Andromeda Military Academy's theoretical warfare courses, she had spoken exactly 7 times, and each instance had been to answer direct questions with responses no longer than 5 words. Professor Thexani noticed her silence, as he always did. There was something unsettling about the human student that he couldn't identify. While her test scores ranked in the top 5% of the class, her complete lack of verbal participation troubled him. In military theory, communication was vital. How could someone succeed in actual combat situations if they couldn't even speak up in a classroom? "Miss Chun," he said, his voice carrying across the hall. "Perhaps you have thoughts on unconventional warfare tactics?" Every alien head turned toward Maya. She looked up slowly, her face betraying nothing. For a moment that stretched uncomfortably long, she simply stared at the professor. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Silence." Professor Thexani's neck frills fluttered in confusion. "Could you elaborate?" "Silence is a weapon," Maya replied, her voice so quiet that the students in the back rows leaned forward to hear. "Enemies expect noise. They prepare for obvious attacks. They don't prepare for what they can't see coming." Her answer created a ripple of dismissive sounds throughout the classroom. Several Zalari students clicked derisively. The Karath pack exchanged what were clearly mockingly soft barks. Even the usually respectful Vaxen crystals dimmed in what their species considered amusement. "An interesting perspective," Professor Thexani said diplomatically, though his tone suggested he found it simplistic. However, modern warfare relies on coordination, communication, and decisive action. Silence, while perhaps useful for reconnaissance, hardly constitutes a comprehensive tactical approach. Maya nodded once and returned to her note-taking, effectively ending her participation for the day. The discussion moved on to more traditional topics, and she was forgotten again, just as she preferred. After class, as students filed out in their various groupings, Maya remained seated until the hall emptied. This too had become routine. She avoided the social clusters, the study groups, the casual conversations that filled the corridors. When she finally gathered her materials and left, she moved with a peculiar grace that none of her classmates had ever noticed. Her footsteps made no sound on the metal flooring. Her bag never rustled. Even her breathing seemed controlled to minimize any audible presence. The dormitory halls presented their own challenge. Maya's room assignment had placed her in the interspecies housing block, supposedly to encourage cultural exchange. In practice, it meant enduring the constant cacophony of different alien communication methods at all hours. Zalari clicking echoed through the walls. Karath howling sessions occurred every evening. Vaxin harmonic resonances could be felt through the floor. Maya's room, by contrast, was a haven of silence. No music, no entertainment feeds, no communication devices left active. Her personal belongings were arranged with military precision, though she had never served in any armed forces. Her bed was made to standards that would satisfy the strictest drill instructor. Her study materials were organized in perfect symmetry. She sat at her desk and opened her tablet to review the day's lecture notes. But instead of Professor Thexani's conventional warfare theories, she found herself typing different thoughts. Her fingers moved across the screen with the same rapid precision she brought to everything, creating documents that none of her classmates would ever see. Traditional doctrine assumes engagement, she wrote. But engagement requires detection. What cannot be detected cannot be countered. What cannot be predicted cannot be prevented. She paused, considering. Around her, the dormitory filled with evening sounds. Alien students returning from dinner, study sessions beginning, social interactions that she never participated in. They had all categorized her as shy and asocial, perhaps even intellectually limited despite her test scores. They were wrong on all counts, but their assumptions served her purposes perfectly. Maya had been raised in the mountain regions of Tibet, where her grandmother had taught her traditional meditation techniques that emphasized control of breath, movement, and presence. What began as spiritual practice had evolved into something far more practical when Maya discovered her natural aptitude for moving undetected. In the crowded cities where her family later lived, she could walk through busy streets without anyone noticing her passage. In school, she could observe classrooms for entire periods without teachers remembering she was there. When the opportunity arose to attend the Galactic Military Academy through the Human Exchange Program, Maya had seen it as a chance to study alien military doctrine from the inside. She never intended to apply the knowledge practically. She was, by all appearances, a quiet student pursuing theoretical understanding. But the galaxy was about to change those plans. 3,000 light-years away, in the war-torn Kepler sector, the conflict that military historians would later call the Silent War was beginning to unfold. The aggressive hegemony empire had launched surprise attacks against 7 different species simultaneously, using new stealth technologies that rendered their fleets nearly undetectable until they struck. Traditional defensive strategies were failing catastrophically. The Galactic Council's combined fleets, designed for conventional engagements, found themselves fighting an enemy that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Conventional wisdom suggested responding with improved detection technology and heavier firepower. But conventional wisdom was proving inadequate against an enemy that had mastered the art of striking without warning. The war's first phase would last only 6 weeks, but in that time, over 40 billion beings would lose their lives. Entire planets would be conquered before their populations knew they were under attack. The greatest military minds in the galaxy would find their strategies useless against an enemy that refused to fight by established rules. Back at the Academy, News of the attacks reached the students through official announcements and emergency broadcasts. Maya watched her classmates' reactions with quiet attention. The Zalari became agitated, their mandible clicking, reaching frantic speeds as they discussed their homeworld's proximity to the conflict zone. Karath students formed protective packs, growling at any perceived threats. Vaccine crystals pulsed with anxious energy. Professor Thexani called an emergency assembly to address the situation. The great hall filled with nervous energy as over 3,000 students from 47 species gathered to hear their instructor's assessment of the developing crisis. The hegemony's tactics represent a significant evolution in warfare, Professor Thexani announced, his voice carrying unusual tension. They have developed stealth capabilities that surpass our current detection methods. However, we must remember that throughout galactic history, every new military development has eventually been countered by adaptive strategies. A Zalari student raised her clawed hand. Professor, our analysis suggests the hegemony's success rate approaches 97% in surprise attacks. How can conventional forces adapt to an enemy that cannot be detected until after they strike? Increased sensor networks, improved patrol patterns, and enhanced rapid response capabilities, Professor Thexani replied. These are proven methods for addressing stealth-based threats. Maya sat in her usual position, listening but not participating. Around her, students asked increasingly worried questions about defensive strategies, evacuation procedures, and combat readiness. The professor's answers followed standard military doctrine, emphasizing technological solutions and traditional tactical responses. But Maya's mind was working through different calculations. She understood something that her classmates and instructors had not yet grasped. The hegemony's success wasn't just based on stealth technology. It was based on their enemy's assumption that warfare required detectable, conventional engagement patterns. The hegemony had learned to be silent, but they had not learned that silence could work both ways. As the assembly continued, Maya made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. She would not remain a silent student much longer. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology, their numbers, or their traditional military might. It was their ability to think in ways that the rest of the galaxy had never imagined. The girl who never spoke above a whisper was about to become the loudest voice in the universe, not through words, but through actions that would make the hegemony empire understand exactly why Earth's children were never to be underestimated. But first, she had homework to finish. Even revolutionaries needed to maintain their cover. The Academy's emergency protocols activated 72 hours after the initial hegemony attacks. Maya watched from her dormitory window as transport ships descended to evacuate non-essential personnel and students from species whose homeworlds were in immediate danger. The courtyard below filled with organized chaos as military instructors implemented evacuation procedures with mechanical precision. Professor Thexani had announced that classes would continue for remaining students, but the atmosphere had changed dramatically. Where once the Academy buzzed with theoretical discussions and academic debates, now every conversation centered on real-world applications of military doctrine. Students who had never considered actual combat suddenly found themselves analyzing battle reports and casualty statistics. Maya remained in her room during most evacuation activities, ostensibly studying for examinations that seemed increasingly irrelevant. But her tablet screen displayed something far different from academic coursework. She had accessed the Academy's military database using her student credentials, downloading every available report about hegemony tactics and engagement patterns. The picture that emerged was both fascinating and terrifying. The hegemony empire consisted of a species called the Kethvar, beings who had evolved in deep space environments where sound, light, and electromagnetic signatures were luxuries they couldn't afford. Their natural physiology made them nearly invisible to most detection methods. More importantly, their entire military philosophy was built around striking targets that never saw them coming. But Maya noticed something in the reports that apparently no one else had observed. The Kethvar were successful because they had never encountered an enemy that could match their stealth capabilities. Every species they had conquered relied on technology to detect threats. When their sensors failed, their entire defensive strategy collapsed. Human warfare, however, had evolved differently. Earth's military traditions included centuries of unconventional tactics, guerrilla warfare, and adaptation to technologically superior enemies. More importantly, human special forces had developed techniques that relied on natural abilities rather than technological advantages. Maya spent the next week creating detailed analyses that she shared with no one. Her room became a command center where she mapped Kethvar attack patterns, identified weaknesses in their approach, and developed counter-strategies that required no advanced technology whatsoever. The breakthrough came when she realized that the Kethvar had a fatal blind spot. They were so focused on remaining undetected that they never expected their enemies to be equally invisible. Their entire tactical doctrine assumed they would always have superior situational awareness. They hunt, Maya whispered to herself in the empty room, but they've never been hunted. The opportunity to test her theories arrived sooner than expected. Admiral Corexon, the Zalari officer commanding the Academy's security forces, announced that advanced students would be participating in defensive operations. The hegemony had been detected approaching systems near the Academy's location, and all available personnel would be mobilized to support evacuation and reconnaissance missions. Maya volunteered immediately, her first proactive action since arriving at the Academy. Professor Thexani expressed surprise at her sudden interest in practical applications, but approved her participation in reconnaissance operations. Her academic performance qualified her for advanced assignments, and the military desperately needed personnel with theoretical knowledge of unconventional tactics. Miss Chun will be assigned to Reconnaissance Unit 12, Admiral Corexon announced during the briefing. Her role will be observational only. Under no circumstances should student personnel engage with hegemony forces directly. Maya nodded silently, accepting her assignment with the same quiet demeanor she brought to everything else. But privately, she knew that circumstances rarely followed official plans. Reconnaissance Unit 12 consisted of 8 beings from 6 different species, led by Sergeant Vextar, a seasoned Karath warrior with over 20 years of combat experience. The unit's mission was to establish observation posts in the outer system and report hegemony movement patterns to the main defense force. During the pre-mission briefing, Sergeant Vextar outlined standard reconnaissance protocols. Each team member would be equipped with advanced sensor equipment, communication devices, and emergency transponders. Their positions would be coordinated through central command to ensure maximum coverage while maintaining safe distances from potential contact zones. Remember, Sergeant Vextar growled, his bark-like voice carrying authority developed through numerous campaigns. We are the eyes and ears of the defense force. Our job is to see without being seen, to report without engaging. The moment the hegemony detects our presence, they will adapt their approach accordingly. Maya listened carefully, but she was already developing modifications to the standard approach. The sergeant's plan was tactically sound by conventional standards, but it relied on the same assumptions that have failed every other military force that encountered the Kethvar. They were planning to hide their technology rather than hiding themselves. The transport ship that carried Reconnaissance Unit 12 to their deployment zone was a marvel of modern military engineering. Equipped with stealth fields, sensor dampers, and signal scramblers, it represented the pinnacle of defensive technology available to Galactic Council forces. Maya studied the systems during transit, noting both their capabilities and their limitations. Impressive equipment, commented Velthari, the unit's vaccine communications specialist. Her crystalline form pulsed with approval as she interfaced with the ship's systems. Our technological advantage should allow us to observe hegemony movements while remaining completely undetected. Maya said nothing, but privately disagreed. The ship's stealth systems were designed to hide from conventional sensors, but the Kethvar had already proven that their detection methods were far from conventional. More importantly, the reliance on technological solutions created single points of failure that could compromise the entire mission. Their destination was a small asteroid field in the system's outer reaches, where they would establish observation posts among the larger rocks. The tactical advantage was obvious. Numerous hiding places, multiple escape routes, and clear lines of sight toward the system's primary approach vectors. But as their transport approached the deployment zone, Maya noticed something that made her reconsider everything. The asteroid field was exactly where she would position an ambush if she were planning to eliminate reconnaissance forces. "Sergeant Vextar," Maya said quietly, speaking for the first time during the mission. "What if the hegemony expects us to use the asteroid field?" The Karath sergeant's ears twitched in what might have been amusement. "Miss Chun, the asteroid field provides optimal concealment for our observation equipment. The hegemony cannot detect us among those rocks. But they can detect where we're likely to hide," Maya replied. "If they know our tactical doctrine, they know where we'll position ourselves. Our doctrine has been developed through centuries of successful military operations," Sergeant Vextar growled. "Student observations are noted, but field experience takes precedence over theoretical concerns." Maya nodded and returned to silence, but her mind was racing through alternative scenarios. The unit deployed exactly as planned, with each member taking predetermined positions among the larger asteroids. Their equipment activated flawlessly, creating sensor networks that should have detected any approaching vessels long before they entered effective combat range. For 6 hours, everything proceeded according to protocol. Regular communication checks confirmed that all positions remained secure. Sensor readings showed no anomalous activity in the area. The asteroid field provided excellent concealment while maintaining clear observation capabilities. Maya, positioned on a medium-sized asteroid designated Rock 7, spent those 6 hours doing something her teammates would have considered insane. Instead of relying on her equipment to monitor the surrounding space, she focused on natural observation techniques her grandmother had taught her. She controlled her breathing until it became completely silent. She positioned herself to minimize any visual signature. Most importantly, she listened with her entire being, not for sounds that couldn't travel through space, but for the subtle intuition that warned of approaching danger. At hour 6 and 37 minutes, Maya knew they were being watched. She couldn't explain the sensation in scientific terms. Her equipment showed nothing unusual. Her teammates reported normal conditions. But every instinct developed through years of moving unseen through crowded environments told her that something was observing their positions with predatory patience. Maya activated her personal communication device, connecting to Sergeant Vextar's command frequency. "Sergeant, we need to evacuate immediately." "Negative, Miss Chun. All sensors show clear conditions. We maintain position until the scheduled rotation." "Sergeant, they're already here. They're watching us." "Miss Chun, you'll maintain communication discipline and continue your observation duties. Student intuition does not override sensor readings." Maya closed the communication channel and faced a decision that would define the rest of her life. She could follow orders, maintain position, and trust in technology that she knew was inadequate against the Kethvar. Or she could trust the instincts that had never failed her, abandon her post, and save her teammates through actions that would violate every protocol she had been taught. The choice was easier than she expected. Maya gathered her essential equipment and abandoned her assigned position, moving through the asteroid field with techniques no alien species had ever developed. She didn't use powered movement systems that might create detectable signatures. Instead, she used calculated momentum and gravitational interactions to drift between rocks like a piece of natural debris. Her destination was the observation post assigned to Corporal Zethany, a young Zalari soldier who had been friendly during their brief interactions. If Maya's suspicions were correct, his position would be the first target in any hegemony attack pattern. She reached his asteroid just as the attack began. The Kethvar vessels didn't decloak dramatically or announce their presence with weapons fire. They simply materialized around the reconnaissance positions like deadly phantoms, their dark hulls nearly invisible against the star field. Maya counted 6 ships, each one positioned to eliminate a specific observation post with precise, coordinated strikes. Corporal Zethany never saw the weapon that vaporized his position. None of Reconnaissance Unit 12 had time to transmit warnings or escape to their evacuation coordinates. In less than 30 seconds, 7 of the 8 team members were dead, their equipment destroyed, their mission compromised completely. Maya watched the slaughter from her concealed position between 2 asteroids, remaining perfectly motionless as Kethvar vessels swept the area for survivors. She observed their movement patterns, their search techniques, and, most importantly, their assumptions about how enemies would behave when cornered. For the first time in her life, Maya Chun was not just a silent student observing from the margins. She was a predator studying her prey, learning their weaknesses, and preparing to demonstrate exactly why humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The Kethvar had eliminated Reconnaissance Unit 12, but they had made a fatal mistake. They had left one human alive, undetected, and thoroughly motivated to ensure that their tactical advantages would never again surprise an unprepared enemy. The real war was about to begin, and Maya would make sure the galaxy remembered that silence was indeed a weapon. But not in the way anyone expected. Maya remained motionless for 14 hours after the Kethvar ships departed. During that time, she observed their cleanup procedures, analyzed their search patterns, and, most importantly, identified the technological signatures they used to confirm target elimination. The alien predators were thorough, but their thoroughness followed predictable patterns that revealed crucial information about their operational methods. When rescue ships finally arrived to investigate the loss of communication with Reconnaissance Unit 12, they found exactly what the Kethvar intended: 7 destroyed observation posts, scattered debris, and no survivors. Maya watched the rescue operation from her concealment, noting how the recovery teams followed standard protocols that would have made them equally vulnerable to hegemony attacks. Lieutenant Commander Vorthex, leading the rescue mission, established a perimeter around the asteroid field, while search teams investigated each destroyed position. Their movements were precise, professional, and completely predictable to any enemy that understood Galactic Council military doctrine. Maya could have revealed herself at any time during the 12-hour search operation. Instead, she remained hidden and continued observing, studying both the rescue procedures and the space around them where Kethvar vessels might still be concealed. Her patience was rewarded when she detected subtle gravitational distortions that indicated cloaked ships monitoring the recovery operation. The hegemony was learning Galactic Council response protocols in real time, gathering intelligence that would make future attacks even more devastating. Every standard procedure the rescue teams followed provided valuable tactical information to an enemy that specialized in turning predictable behaviors into fatal weaknesses. When the rescue operation concluded with official reports listing all reconnaissance team members as killed in action, Maya made her move. But instead of revealing herself to friendly forces, she began the most dangerous phase of her improvised mission. She was going to hunt the hunters. Maya's equipment included emergency rations for 72 hours and basic life support for twice that duration. Her power cells could maintain essential functions for a week if she managed them carefully. Most importantly, her suit stealth systems were designed for passive concealment rather than active cloaking, making them nearly impossible to detect when used properly. But Maya's real advantages had nothing to do with technology. She understood patience in ways that no other species could comprehend. Growing up in Tibet's mountain regions had taught her to wait for weather patterns to change, to move only when conditions were perfect, and to survive on minimal resources for extended periods. The Kethvar assumed that any surviving enemies would either seek immediate rescue or attempt rapid evacuation to friendly territory. They never considered that a lone human might choose to remain in a combat zone for the purpose of gathering intelligence on their operations. Maya's first objective was to locate the Kethvar base of operations in the local area. Their attack patterns suggested a forward staging area within the system, but conventional sensors had never detected it. She suspected that their concealment methods were so advanced that they could hide entire facilities in plain sight. Using natural asteroid trajectories and minimal thrust adjustments, Maya began a systematic search of the outer system. She moved like a piece of space debris, drifting between gravitational influences while maintaining passive sensor sweeps for any anomalous readings. The search took 6 days. On the 7th day, Maya found something that changed her understanding of the enemy completely. Hidden within a cluster of asteroids that appeared unremarkable on long-range scans, the Kethvar had constructed a base that defied every assumption about their capabilities. The facility wasn't just camouflaged or cloaked. It had been built inside hollowed-out asteroids and connected by tunnels that created no external signatures whatsoever. Maya positioned herself on a nearby asteroid and began the most comprehensive reconnaissance mission of her life. Using techniques her grandmother had taught her for observing wildlife without disturbing natural behavior patterns, she cataloged Kethvar operational procedures, personnel rotations, and tactical preparations. What she discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The Kethvar weren't just skilled at stealth tactics. They were master strategists who had spent decades studying every species in the Galactic Council, identifying weaknesses in military doctrine, cultural blind spots, and technological dependencies that could be exploited in combat. Their base contained detailed intelligence profiles on 47 different species, including tactical assessments of how each one responded to various forms of psychological and physical pressure. Maya observed briefings where Kethvar commanders discussed optimal methods for terrorizing Zalari populations, exploiting Koroth pack mentalities, and disrupting Vaxxan harmonic communications. But when she accessed their intelligence files on humans, Maya discovered something that changed everything. The Kethvar had virtually no data on human military capabilities beyond basic technological assessments. Their files contained detailed information about human cities, populations, and industrial capacity, but almost nothing about human combat psychology, unconventional tactics, or historical warfare patterns. To the Kethvar, humans were simply another technologically dependent species that would collapse once their sensors and communication systems were neutralized. They had no concept of human adaptability, improvisation, or the capacity for individual soldiers to operate effectively without technological support. Maya realized that the hegemony's intelligence failure represented an unprecedented opportunity. They were planning attacks based on incomplete information, assuming that humans would respond like every other species they had conquered. But before she could exploit that advantage, Maya needed to survive long enough to warn someone about what she had learned. Her opportunity came during the base's 8th day of operations, when she observed preparations for a major assault on the academy itself. The Kethvar had identified the military school as a high-value target, planning to eliminate the next generation of Galactic Council officers before they could graduate and join defensive forces. Maya watched as assault ships were loaded with specialized equipment designed to penetrate the Academy's shields and neutralize its defensive systems. She observed tactical briefings that revealed exact attack timelines, approach vectors, and targeting priorities. Most importantly, she learned that the assault was scheduled for the following day, during a ceremony when all students and faculty would be gathered in the main assembly hall. The attack would kill over 3,000 beings in a single strike, eliminating some of the galaxy's most promising young officers and experienced military instructors. It would also serve as a demonstration of hegemony power that would demoralize resistance across dozens of systems. Maya could not allow that to happen. She had no way to communicate with friendly forces without revealing her position to Kethvar sensors. Her emergency transmitter lacked the range to reach the Academy directly, and any signal powerful enough to penetrate the distance would immediately attract enemy attention. But Maya had spent weeks studying Kethvar procedures, learning their operational patterns and identifying the weaknesses in their seemingly perfect tactical approach. She knew exactly how to turn their own strengths against them. The Kethvar base followed rigid security protocols that assumed external threats would be large, technologically advanced, and easily detectable. Their perimeter defenses were designed to stop fleets, not individual infiltrators. Their internal security focused on preventing sabotage of major systems rather than protecting against precise, targeted disruption. Most importantly, their entire operational philosophy was built around the assumption that enemies would try to fight them directly rather than turning their own tactics against them. Maya began her infiltration during the base's equivalent of night cycle, when personnel rotations were minimal and most systems operated on automated protocols. She moved through the asteroid tunnels using techniques that made her presence virtually undetectable, avoiding sensor grids and patrol patterns that had been optimized against conventional threats. Her target wasn't the base's weapons systems or command center. Instead, Maya focused on the communication relays that the Kethvar used to coordinate their operations across multiple systems. The beauty of her plan lay in its simplicity. She didn't need to destroy enemy capabilities or fight superior forces. She only needed to ensure that the right information reached the right people at exactly the right time. Maya accessed the Kethvar communication network using techniques that exploited their own security assumptions. Their encryption was designed to prevent external interception, not internal manipulation by someone who understood their operational codes. Instead of transmitting warnings to the Academy directly, Maya embedded her intelligence into the Kethvar's own tactical communications. She created false reports that would trigger automated responses, modified operational timelines that would disrupt attack coordination, and, most cleverly, inserted data corruption that would make enemy commanders doubt the accuracy of their intelligence. But her masterstroke was personal. Maya had observed enough Kethvar briefings to understand their command structure and communication protocols. She knew which officers were responsible for authorizing attacks, how they verified orders, and what security measures they used to prevent tactical deception. Using that knowledge, Maya created a series of false communications that appeared to originate from high-ranking hegemony commanders. The messages indicated that human military capabilities had been severely underestimated, that Earth possessed advanced stealth technologies similar to Kethvar systems, and that immediate tactical reassessment was required before proceeding with major operations. The false intelligence was crafted to exploit Kethvar psychology and operational doctrine. Maya had observed that their species was naturally cautious when faced with unknown variables, preferring to gather additional information rather than risk tactical surprises. By introducing doubt about human capabilities at exactly the right moment, Maya created a delay in the Academy attack that would give friendly forces time to prepare defenses. But she wasn't finished. Maya's final action before evacuating the Kethvar base was to plant evidence of her own presence in their intelligence files. She wanted the hegemony to know that a single human had infiltrated their most secure facility, gathered comprehensive intelligence on their operations, and manipulated their communications without being detected. She wanted them to understand that their assumptions about human limitations were catastrophically wrong. When Maya finally departed the asteroid base, she carried with her complete intelligence on hegemony operations, detailed tactical assessments of their capabilities, and, most importantly, proof that the Kethvar could be outfought by an enemy that understood their weaknesses. But her most valuable discovery was personal. Maya-chan had learned that she was no longer a silent student observing military theory from academic safety. She was a weapon of unprecedented precision, capable of actions that could change the outcome of galactic conflicts. The girl who never spoke above a whisper was about to become the loudest voice in the universe, and the hegemony empire was about to learn exactly why underestimating humanity was the last mistake any enemy ever made. Maya's return to the Academy created the kind of disruption that military historians would analyze for decades. Her official status remained killed in action when she appeared in Admiral Corexon, office, carrying intelligence data that shouldn't have existed and providing tactical assessments that challenged fundamental assumptions about hegemony capabilities. Miss Chun, Admiral Correction, said slowly, his Zalari mandibles clicking in confusion. According to our records, you died 9 days ago with the rest of Reconnaissance Unit 12. I did not die, Maya replied in her characteristic whisper. I learned. The intelligence she provided was so comprehensive that Admiral Correction initially suspected deception or enemy manipulation. No single individual could have gathered such detailed information about hegemony operations, especially not a student with no combat experience and minimal technological training. But Maya's data proved accurate in ways that convinced even the most skeptical military analysts. Her intelligence included attack timelines that matched incoming sensor readings, tactical assessments that explained previously inexplicable hegemony victories, and, most importantly, specific information about the planned Academy assault that was confirmed when enhanced scans detected approaching enemy vessels. How did you obtain this information? Admiral Korax demanded. I watched them, Maya said simply. They did not know I was watching. The explanation should have been impossible. Kethvar detection capabilities surpassed anything in the Galactic Council's technological arsenal. Their base security was designed to prevent infiltration by the most advanced military forces. Yet this quiet human student claimed to have spent days observing their operations from inside their most secure facility. Admiral Korax faced a choice that would define his military legacy. He could follow standard protocol, treating Maya's intelligence as unverified and potentially compromised until it underwent extensive analysis. Or he could trust the assessment of someone who had accomplished what no other intelligence operative in galactic history had achieved. The approach of confirmed hegemony assault forces made the decision easier. Miss Chun, you will provide a complete briefing to our tactical staff immediately, Admiral Correction ordered. Everything you observed, every detail you can remember, every assessment you can offer about enemy capabilities and intentions. Maya nodded once and began the most important presentation of her life. The Academy's primary briefing hall filled with senior military officers, advanced students, and tactical specialists as Maya methodically described 9 days of observations that transformed galactic understanding of the hegemony threat. She spoke in her usual whisper, forcing everyone to lean forward and listen carefully to every word. Kethvar tactics are based on 3 assumptions, Maya began. First, that enemies rely on technology for detection and communication. Second, that enemies follow predictable military doctrine. Third, that enemies will attempt direct engagement when threatened. She activated the hall's display systems, showing detailed diagrams of Kethvar base layout, personnel rotations, and operational procedures that she had memorized during her infiltration. All 3 assumptions are wrong when applied to properly trained human operatives, Maya continued. Humans can operate without technological support. Humans adapt doctrine to circumstances. Humans avoid direct engagement when indirect methods are more effective. Professor Thexani, attending the briefing despite being officially non-military personnel, raised his hand. Miss Chun, you're suggesting that human capabilities represent something unprecedented in galactic warfare. That seems optimistic. Maya turned to face her former instructor. For the first time since arriving at the Academy, she made direct eye contact while speaking. Professor, you taught that modern warfare requires communication and coordination. You taught that silence is ineffective against organized military forces. You were wrong about both points. The hall fell completely silent. Maya's quiet voice continued without emotion or emphasis. The hegemony succeeds because they fight enemies who cannot imagine warfare without technology, communication, and conventional tactics. They have never fought humans because they have never encountered a species that developed warfare principles based on individual capability rather than technological advantage. Admiral Korax interrupted. Miss Chun, are you recommending that we abandon our technological advantages and fight the hegemony using primitive methods. No, my Yeti. I am recommending that we use human capabilities to neutralize hegemony advantages while maintaining our own technological superiority. The enemy expects us to fight according to established doctrine. When we fight according to human doctrine, they cannot adapt quickly enough to counter our approach. She activated new displays showing tactical recommendations that she had developed during her observation period. The strategies were unlike anything in standard Galactic Council military theory. Instead of massing our forces for conventional engagement, we deploy individual operatives who can gather intelligence without detection. Instead of relying on electronic communication, we use operatives who can make tactical decisions independently. Instead of attacking enemy strength, we exploit their assumption that we cannot match their stealth capabilities. The recommendations should have seemed impossible to implement. Training programs throughout the galaxy were designed around technological integration and coordinated unit tactics. Individual operatives working without support contradicted fundamental principles that had guided military development for centuries. But Maya's intelligence provided proof that conventional approaches were failing catastrophically against the hegemony threat. Every major engagement had resulted in decisive enemy victories because Galactic Council forces couldn't adapt to opponents that refused to fight by established rules. Miss Chun, Admiral Correction, said carefully, "Are you volunteering to serve as the foundation for this new tactical approach?" Maya considered the question for a long moment. She had spent 3 years avoiding attention, participating minimally in academic discussions, and maintaining the lowest possible profile among her peers. The Admiral was asking her to become the most visible and important individual in the galactic military. "Yes," she said quietly. The briefing continued for 6 hours as Maya provided detailed assessments of hegemony capabilities, specific recommendations for countertactics, and, most importantly, training protocols that could develop human-style warfare capabilities among non-human operatives. But the most significant moment came when she addressed the Academy's student body directly. Over 2,000 students from 47 species gathered in the main assembly hall to hear Maya explain why everything they had learned about military theory was inadequate against the current threat. Many of these students had dismissed her as antisocial and intellectually limited. Now, they were being told that her approach to warfare represented the only viable solution to an existential galactic crisis. "You have been taught that modern warfare requires advanced technology, coordinated units, and communication networks," Maya told the assembled students. "These teachings are correct for conventional enemies. But the hegemony is not conventional." She paused, looking across faces that represented the future leadership of galactic military forces. The Kethvar have studied every species in the Galactic Council. They know how Zalari forces respond to coordinated attacks. They understand Karath pack tactics and how to disrupt pack coordination. They can predict Vaxen harmonic communication patterns and interrupt them selectively. Another pause as she let the implications settle. But they have never studied human warfare because humans have never been forced to fight for galactic survival. They do not know that humans can operate alone for extended periods. They do not know that humans can adapt tactics in real time without central coordination. They do not know that human individuals can accomplish objectives that require entire units of other species. A Karath student raised his clawed hand. "Human, are you claiming that your species is superior to all others in warfare?" Maya shook her head slowly. "I'm not claiming superiority. I am identifying capability differences that create tactical opportunities. Every species has advantages that others cannot match. But in this specific conflict, against this specific enemy, human warfare principles provide solutions that conventional doctrine cannot achieve." She activated displays showing the intelligence she had gathered about planned hegemony operations against worlds throughout the galaxy. The scope of the enemy's strategic objectives was staggering, but Maya's analysis revealed vulnerabilities that could be exploited using unconventional approaches. The hegemony plans to conquer 43 systems within the next 6 months, Maya explained. Their timeline is based on assumptions about how long it takes to defeat conventional military resistance. But their timeline fails if they encounter enemies who fight using principles they cannot predict or counter. The plan Maya proposed was both elegant and terrifying. Instead of massing conventional forces for large-scale engagements, the Galactic Council would deploy human-trained operatives to gather intelligence, disrupt enemy communications, and eliminate key personnel using stealth techniques that matched or exceeded Keth-Var capabilities. But the plan required volunteers from across the galaxy, beings willing to abandon everything they had learned about military doctrine and embrace warfare principles that contradicted their species' natural approaches to conflict. Who among you is willing to learn to fight like humans? Maya asked the assembly. The question hung in the air for a long moment. Then, slowly, hands and claws and appendages began rising across the hall. Zalari students who had mocked Maya's silence volunteered to learn stealth techniques. Karath warriors agreed to train for individual operations despite their pack-based psychology. Vaccine crystals pulsed with determination to master human-style adaptability. By the end of the assembly, over 1,500 students had volunteered for training programs that didn't yet exist, based on tactical theories that had never been tested, led by a human who had never held military rank. Admiral Korekson approached Maya after the presentation. Miss Chun, I am promoting you to the rank of Tactical Specialist, effective immediately. You will have full authority to develop training programs and operational procedures for implementing your recommendations. Maya nodded silently, accepting responsibilities that would make her one of the most influential military leaders in galactic history. But she wasn't thinking about rank or authority or historical significance. She was thinking about the Keth-Var commanders who had discovered evidence of her infiltration and were now frantically reassessing their assumptions about human capabilities. The silent student had become a teacher, and her first lesson was going to demonstrate exactly why the Hegemony Empire had made a fatal error when they decided to threaten Earth's children. The real war was about to begin, and Maya Chun intended to fight it on terms that no alien species had ever imagined. 6 months after Maya, Chun transformed from silent student to tactical revolutionary. Her name had become legend across 47 star systems. But the beings who spoke of Ghost and Whisper and the Silent Death had no idea that their hero was currently hiding in a maintenance shaft aboard the Hegemony Empire's most advanced battleship, preparing to end a war that had consumed entire civilizations. The operation that would later be called the Last Silence began with Maya doing what she had always done best, observing from the shadows while her enemies made fatal assumptions about human limitations. The Keth-Var had adapted to human-style warfare with terrifying efficiency. After losing 14 major operations to Maya's disciples, hegemony strategists developed new detection methods, modified their communication protocols, and implemented security measures designed specifically to counter human infiltration techniques. But their adaptations revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of what made Maya Chun dangerous. They assumed that human effectiveness came from superior stealth technology or specialized training programs. They never realized that Maya's greatest weapon was her ability to think in ways that no other species could comprehend. The hegemony's newest battleship, the Void Sovereign, represented their answer to the human threat. Equipped with experimental sensors that could detect biological signatures at unprecedented ranges, defended by automated systems that responded faster than any living reflexes, and staffed by personnel trained to counter every known human tactic, the vessel was considered absolutely impregnable. Maya had been aboard for 3 days. Her presence on the ship began with a technique so simple that Keth-Var security analysts would spend years trying to understand how they had missed it. During a routine supply transfer at a neutral station, Maya had hidden herself among cargo containers using methods that relied on patience and positioning rather than technological concealment. The Keth-Var had scanned every container, verified every manifest, and confirmed that no unauthorized personnel had accessed their supplies. But Maya understood something about alien psychology that their security protocols couldn't account for. They were looking for threats that matched their own capabilities. Maya had made herself into cargo. Using techniques her grandmother had taught her for controlling body temperature, heart rate, and breathing patterns, Maya reduced her biological signature to levels that barely registered as living tissue. Sealed in a modified storage container with minimal life support, she had endured 18 hours of transport, while Kethvar sensors detected nothing more threatening than emergency supplies. Once aboard the Void Sovereign, Maya began the most complex reconnaissance mission in galactic history. The ship contained intelligence files on every human operation conducted during the war, detailed analyses of Maya's tactical methods, and, most importantly, the complete strategic plan for the hegemony's final offensive against Earth itself. What Maya discovered in those files changed everything she thought she knew about the conflict. The Kethvar weren't just trying to conquer human territory or eliminate human military forces. They were planning to study human warfare capabilities by capturing Earth's population intact, using the planet as a laboratory for developing countermeasures against human-style tactics. The hegemony had concluded that humans represented an evolutionary leap in warfare capabilities that could eventually threaten their entire empire. Their solution was to contain the threat by turning humanity's own adaptability against them, learning human methods well enough to predict and counter them in future conflicts. But Maya realized that the Kethvar had made a crucial error in their analysis. They assumed that human warfare capabilities were a species-wide trait that could be systematically studied and countered. They didn't understand that human adaptability was fundamentally individual, that each human developed unique approaches based on personal experience and cultural background. Maya Chun fought differently than every other human who had ever lived, and no amount of study would allow enemies to predict her methods. The revelation created an opportunity that Maya had never anticipated. Instead of simply gathering intelligence or disrupting enemy operations, she could strike a blow that would end the war by demonstrating the futility of trying to systematically counter human unpredictability. Her target was the ship's Central Intelligence Core, where the hegemony stored their complete analysis of human capabilities alongside strategic plans for the Earth offensive. But destroying the data wouldn't be sufficient. Maya needed to replace it with something that would fundamentally alter Kethvar understanding of what they were fighting. She spent 2 days creating the most sophisticated deception in military history. Maya accessed the ship's intelligence systems using techniques that exploited Kethvar assumptions about information security. Their encryption was designed to prevent external intrusion, not internal manipulation by someone who understood their behavioral patterns well enough to predict password protocols and security responses. Instead of simply corrupting their data, Maya replaced their analysis of human capabilities with fabricated intelligence that was both completely false and utterly convincing. She created fictional accounts of human military operations that demonstrated capabilities far beyond anything that actually existed. According to Maya's false intelligence, humans possessed telepathic communication abilities that made electronic interception impossible. Human operatives could survive in vacuum for hours without life support. Human tactical adaptation was so advanced that individual soldiers could develop entirely new warfare principles in real time. But Maya's masterstroke was personal and devastating. She created detailed records showing that Maya Chun was not an exceptional individual, but rather a typical example of human military potential. According to her fabricated files, Earth possessed millions of operatives with similar capabilities, all of them currently deployed throughout hegemony territory, all of them gathering intelligence for a coordinated counteroffensive that would eliminate the Kethvar Empire completely. The false intelligence was designed to exploit every aspect of Kethvar psychology that Maya had observed during months of studying their behavior. Their species was naturally cautious when facing superior opponents. They preferred strategic withdrawal to tactical annihilation. Most importantly, They would abandon any objective that required accepting unacceptable casualties. Maya's deception convinced the hegemony leadership that continuing the war would result in their complete destruction by an enemy far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. But she wasn't finished. Maya's final action aboard the Void Sovereign was to plant evidence of systematic infiltration throughout the hegemony fleet. She created false records indicating that human operatives had compromised dozens of ships, gathering intelligence for coordinated attacks that would eliminate Kethvar military capability across multiple systems. The evidence was subtle enough to seem authentic, while being comprehensive enough to create paralyzing uncertainty about the security of their entire military structure. When Maya finally departed the battleship, she used an escape method that epitomized everything the Kethvar had failed to understand about human warfare. Instead of fighting her way through security systems or using advanced stealth technology, she simply walked to the nearest airlock and ejected herself into space. The Kethvar had numerous sensors designed to detect escaping vessels, sophisticated tracking systems for monitoring departing personnel, and automated defenses that could eliminate any technological threat. But they had no protocol for pursuing individuals who abandoned ships without any life support or propulsion systems. Maya drifted away from the Void Sovereign using techniques that made her indistinguishable from space debris, while emergency life support systems kept her alive just long enough to reach the extraction coordinates where a human rescue vessel waited in perfect concealment. The impact of Maya's intelligence coup was immediate and decisive. Within hours of her data infiltration, hegemony command structures began receiving reports that convinced them the war was unwinnable. Kethvar commanders who had never experienced defeat found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to possess impossible capabilities. The false intelligence Maya had created triggered automatic strategic assessments throughout the hegemony military. Computer systems designed to calculate optimal tactical approaches concluded that fighting humans would result in catastrophic losses with no possibility of victory. Within 72 hours, the Kethvar began withdrawing from conquered systems. Within a week, they had abandoned their offensive operations completely. Within a month, hegemony representatives were requesting negotiations for permanent peace agreements. The war that had consumed billions of lives and threatened the destruction of galactic civilization ended not with massive battles or technological breakthroughs, but with a single human using the enemy's own intelligence systems to convince them that victory was impossible. Maya Chun had accomplished what no conventional military force could achieve. She had defeated an enemy without firing a shot, using nothing more than her understanding of how they thought and their inability to comprehend how humans could think differently. When Maya returned to the academy for the victory celebration, she found herself facing the same assembly hall where she had once sat in silent observation. But now the hall was filled with beings from across the galaxy who had come to honor the quiet student who had saved their civilizations. Professor Thexani, now serving as Dean of Advanced Tactical Studies, introduced Maya to the assembled crowd. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all classifications," he announced, "I present Tactical Specialist Maya Chun, the student who taught us that silence truly is the deadliest weapon in the universe." Maya walked to the podium and faced the thousands of beings who owed their lives to her actions. For a moment, she stood in the silence that had always been her greatest strength. Then, in the whisper that had once seemed like weakness but had proven to be unstoppable power, she spoke the words that would be remembered as long as the galaxy endured. "I never wanted to be loud," Maya said quietly, "but sometimes silence speaks loudest of all." The applause that followed could be heard across star systems, but Maya Chun had already returned to her true nature. She stepped away from the podium, walked quietly from the hall, and disappeared into the crowd like the ghost she had always been. Because some heroes save the galaxy not by standing in the spotlight, but by moving through shadows that enemies never see coming. And in a universe full of beings who measured strength by volume and power by visibility, humanity had produced a champion who proved that the deadliest forces are often the ones that make no sound at all. The war was over. The galaxy was safe. And somewhere in the quiet corners of the universe, Maya Chun continued doing what she had always done, watching, learning, and remaining ready to remind anyone who forgot that underestimating humanity was the last mistake any enemy would ever make.